Well, business today is less about doing more and more about doing it much smarter in a world of volatile demand, rising labor costs, and increasingly complex supply chains. The question isn't just how many people you hire, but how effectively you deploy those people. And that's where business process outsourcing or BPO really comes into play. It's often misunderstood, though, and I think sometimes confused with traditional things like labor broking. But increasingly, it's becoming something of a strategic lever for productivity and resilience in South Africa's very tough economic climate. And joining me now is Willie du Preez, Managing Director at PPO South Africa, just to unpack how the model is reshaping retail and warehousing operations. So, Willie, great to have you on. Let's just start at the top because I think this term of BPO gets thrown around quite loosely. So, in practical terms, what is BPO in an operational environment, and how should business leaders think about it differently from traditional outsourcing?
100%. Thanks, Michael. Thanks for having me. Yeah, I think the world is shaped around ever-changing and evolving. In a business process outsource world, we look at how we can improve efficiencies. How can we create more value for the client? How can we take measurable outputs and convert that into a flexible solution for the client?
I think it's fair to say that probably BPO is less about outsourcing people and maybe more about outsourcing outcomes. And that's where I think it becomes much more of a strategically aligned, consideration for a business leader. But if I'm running a retail operation or a warehouse, my instinct might be just simply hire more staff when the demand rises. Why is that increasingly the wrong instinct?
Yeah, many people make that mistake by just adding additional people onto the process. The problem might be with the process itself, which then if you add more people onto that, it just creates a bigger problem. At the end of the day, to optimize the process and look at the bottlenecks and identify where you can increase efficiencies, that actually is the answer. And to have an optimized amount of staff running the optimized output.
Yeah, I think because at face value, hiring may seem simpler, but I think it often becomes very structurally inefficient. And we know sometimes with our labor laws as well. Where do you typically see the biggest cost leakages in in-house models? Is it labor utilization? Is it supervision? Is it productivity tracking, or probably a bit of all three?
Yeah, it's a combination of the three. Let's start with the first one of labor costs. If you have just an amount of people doing a certain function, and then you run into unproductivity in how is it managed? By just adding people, again, you have to increase your management on that to get to the desired output. Again, those people are managed by the hour or on the intervals of 15 minutes as the information is available. To drive productivity, to identify proactively where the loopholes are and where the blockages are, to unblock and to make sure that the people are productive. Coming back to the Labor Relations Act, if you just add more people or employ people yourself with the triangular employment relationship, you are then the deemed employer. With a BPO, we obviously give that liability indemnification to our clients to say that we take ownership of that because we provide a service and we don't provide people for that matter. We increase efficiencies and we take away the liability of the deemed provision of the Labour Relations Act.
And I think one of the big selling points of BPO is this idea of scalability. And we know business is variable, seasonal variances in retail. You're going to be busy over the December period and not so much when it comes to that dry January, February. So just talk to us about how your model allows businesses to kind of flex up during those peak periods and just as importantly, scale down without destroying margins.
So there's always one of two scenarios. You either have a planned increase or influx in demand, or you have an unplanned. So when you have a planned one, obviously a lot of planning goes into it with regards to or based on the forecasted volumes or increase in volumes. So you can proactively then make sure that your staff pools are ready for that influx. Being part of a bigger company that employs in the vicinity of 35,000 staff every day, we have access to large backup pools or resources. So where there's an unplanned influx or increase in demand, then obviously we can dive into those pools and make sure that we've got the right backup pools to accommodate for any influx or increased volumes.
I think for many, and maybe even in my own mind, Willie, when I think of this, I'm very familiar with temporary employment services in South Africa. And I think many businesses are, and you've argued that BPO is a more effective model because on the surface, I think both offer external labor, but the underlying mechanics are very different. So why would you say that BPO is a more effective model?
So first of all, Michael, I think it's where we convert the fixed cost per hour per employee, where we convert that into a variable cost or fixed cost per output. So as your demand increases, your cost per unit stays the same. You don't have to manage the staff or the amount of staff, you manage the amount of output delivered. And we invoice accordingly. So obviously we do some time and motion studies to see where we have the optimal amount of staff, where we can improve the efficiency of the process, identify the bottlenecks, and in conjunction with the client, then solve those bottlenecks to have the most efficient process running with the optimal staffing levels.
For me, that's a key distinction. It's almost saying there's an accountability layer that's quite different because a temporary employment service might just supply people, but BPO is owning the performance and doing that in conjunction with the client. Can you just give us a concrete example, maybe without naming names if necessary, of how PPO has helped a retailer or logistics operation manage a high pressure peak period?
So one of our clients ramps up to around about 500% of normal volumes during Black Friday. Now that is like I mentioned earlier, one of the planned ones. You can with some good forecasting design that resource that you need for that specific period, and you can proactively start training them and making sure that you have access to those backup pools. Where you employ your own staff, you obviously have the downfall of doing all that training yourself. You have to manage that staff yourself, and by introducing a BPO, we take that onus away from our clients.
And if that's planned, how quickly can it realistically be achieved after implementation? Because I'm sure you managing and monitoring all of the metrics, the throughput, the cost, error rates, and all those things. But some businesses might want to implement this quite quickly. What can they expect in terms of a realistic implementation?
So we've been doing this for the last good 10, 12 years. So we've built up some good knowledge on how to ramp up and implement efficiently. So we haven't missed a due date yet. So if the implementation was on a specific date, or you always get that ones or twos that try and push it before that peak happens to get more exposure. So it might ramp up a little bit earlier. So we take all of that into consideration when we plan these resources, and we implement on the day as it is needed. We're obviously bound by a certain SLA and output on quality and quantity. So we need to deliver a certain output at a certain quality standard. And again, using a BPO, we're in control of that process where we drive those efficiencies and proactively identify the bottlenecks and resolve them as we go.
And I think there's, and you're speaking to it now, there's this hesitation, I would imagine, from business leaders around losing control when you outsource anything. And I'm sure much of that is addressed in the SLAs, but maybe you could just give us some more detail about how you address that particular concern. And do your clients actually end up maybe with more visibility and control because of all of those systems and reporting layers that you're now bringing in?
So obviously the client now, they don't manage the staff anymore to make sure that they are productive. They manage the SLA and the output that we deliver. So we have line of sight on the 24-hour cycle, what is coming in tomorrow. So we can then do our planning on our side to make sure that we've got the right resources. And obviously the learnings of the previous day to see where the newly arose bottlenecks are and solve them.
If you're a business considering a BPO for the first time and you've heard all of this and you think, actually, I think it's about time we offer this strategic optionality to the business. There are many service providers out there. What are the key criteria they should be looking at when selecting the right BPO provider for their business? Because it's not just a procurement decision, Willie. This becomes a strategic partnership that you're entering into as the business.
Absolutely, that's a great question. I wish we started with that one, but yeah, it's obviously looking at a reputable company. You need to make sure that you have the right footprint in that company that can deliver on the promises made and on the output, required output. So it's really important to make sure that client or that partnership is formed and that the liability clauses are addressed with regards to the Labour Relations Act, and that you can deliver from a strategic point of view.
Are there any red flags for anyone who's watching or listening to this and they think, if I go to a meeting and I see one or two things that should give me pause or concern, where do companies go wrong in the selection process?
You mentioned it earlier, Michael, where people tend to hesitate when giving away control. It's difficult for clients to let go of the control and get involved in the operation when we implement certain innovation to drive efficiencies. I always say, look at the output and not look at the input. We want, with a minimal input, create the maximum output and create that value stream for our clients.
If you were to, and you've been at this now, if you were to step back and say, well, the world is changing, where they're seeing this big explosion in retail and e-commerce, last mile distribution, just in time, local sourcing, new competitors, AI displacing some work functions. What is the shift towards BPO tell us about the future of work in sectors like retail and logistics and manufacturing?
So obviously we also tap into the AI world. It's part of everybody's world at this point in time. We utilize a lot of technology, visual boards, where we publish certain steps in the process and milestones achieved or not achieved. So the management of the productivity is really technology AI driven, that enables us to do better forecasting and more accurately predict what resources we would need to fulfill in our requirements.
Well, fascinating. And I think moving towards a model where that kind of operational excellence is increasingly brought in rather than built internally, and the shift from labor as a cost center to operations as a performance engines. And for me, perhaps the takeaway is this: in a world where demand is unpredictable, as we know, that agility isn't optional. I think agility has to be a core way that business leaders are thinking about responding to that kind of VUCA world that we live in. Willie du Preez, thank you very much. Managing Partner at PPO South Africa. Thanks for the insights with us here on Business Talk.
Thanks, Michael. Thanks for the opportunity.